I was starting to see private people in my own clinic at the time then. This was probably like 2010, 2011. And people weren't getting better. They weren't doing the things I asked them to. And I'm sitting there thinking, but I've got all these quals and all these skills and everybody I used to see got better. Why aren't you lot get better? And it's where my whole, like, if I was to just work in one area right now, it would be exercise adherence. That's the thing that sparks me up. I love it. And the understanding of why people do and don't do it. And I had to really reflect internally about, like, well, this is me. This isn't them. This is me. I'm the, the population's changed, but why have I suddenly got such a lack of success with some of these? It's me. It's my expectations of them. It's the way I'm communicating with them. It's the way I'm learning about them.
Well done. You have finally discovered the most important health podcast you will ever need as a medical professional. The conversations you are about to hear are guaranteed to change your clinical practice and hopefully transform you into a better conversationalist. They could even make you better crack at parties. Welcome to TCUP, where swearing is guaranteed. Michael James, my favourite Welsh endurance physio.
From a cast of one.
It's very niche. Super niche physiotherapist, but you're my favourite one of all those, you know what I mean? And you're the only one. So there you go. Well, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
We're going to get straight into 10 quickfire questions. It'll be one or the other. You have to give me one of those answers. Is that all right with you?
Absolutely.
Everyone is going to be able to tell who Mike James is by the end of these 10 questions. Pretty much. They won't need to know anything else, really. Football or triathlons?
Oh, football. Every day of the week.
I like this. I love the certainty. Communication or exercise?
Ooh. Exercise.
Navy or Air Force?
Oh, we'll go for Air Force on that one.
I thought you'd struggle on either of those. You're Army, eh? Were you Army?
No, Air Force.
Oh, shit. I got it wrong. I thought you were Army.
It was easy one.
And that was good. I'll go the other way then. Navy or Army?
Well, I'll have to say Army because the wife was Army.
Fair play. You're boring me already, Mike, with these answers. Blur or Oasis?
Oh, Oasis. Tickets are bought. We're ready to go.
The middle class tickets are being bought. Coach or therapist?
Well, I think it's the same thing, but I'd say coach.
Oh, interesting. Swearing or not swearing?
Swearing.
Tom Jones or Gareth Bale?
Oh my God, that's like picking between my kids. Tom Jones has been in my life all my life. He's the president of Wales. Gareth Bale's given me the greatest moments of my life. Oh my God.
It's a one or the other.
Bale.
Wow. Curry or Chinese?
Curry.
Running or cycling?
Cycling.
Ooh. And then the last one, it's a bit of a longer one. You'd rather Arsenal win the league to stop Spurs getting relegated, or Arsenal don't win and Spurs get relegated?
Oh, I don't mind the championship. Let's go down. I can't watch them win the league. Can't do it.
Love it. Spurs fans, you're consistent anyway. That's for sure. That's for sure. Sounds good. Nice. I like that. Right. What? I just like to ask everyone, what type of music, kind of music, band, anything you like, would describe you or define you as a therapist?
No, it's such an easy one to answer this. This is probably 20 years ago I was told this. In my pomp of life as well. I was described in my mid-20s as having the musical taste of a middle-aged housewife. I am boy bands and ballads all the way long, and it's 80s, 90s. I probably don't creep too much past the 2000s. It's Magic FM in the car all the time. I am living in someone else's body, I think.
How does that relate? Does that relate anything to your therapy style or communication style?
Only in the way that I would say I've gone a lot old school. I've gone back to basics a lot more. I've gone back to the things that perhaps caused me the foundations of the way I think and act. So not so much the music style itself or the bands I listen to, but I guess if you were to match them up a little bit, I tend to be a little bit more laid back and mellow in my approach. I'm not a shouty therapist anymore. I'm not sort of ranty or aggressive or loud. It's much more calm and relaxed. So probably does reflect it in some ways.
And if I just explore that more, is that the same kind of online with, because obviously you've been online for a long time and present and, you know, doing lots of great stuff on there and presenting and things, but is that true for that?
I don't think I've listened to loads of these debates about how people are online. I don't think I'm any different. I honestly don't. The things I like to talk. I like to give someone enough time to talk. I like to listen. I think I can mirror and I can have the right body language. I can have the right environment behind me to have just the same interaction with people. Yes, I don't touch them. It's not as tactile as it might be in person. But I don't think, and if anything, sometimes I think the attention's more focused online. There is less distractions, there's less noise, there's less things going on in the background. So I don't think I'm any different, and I don't think anyone really should be.
And I suppose, I think you've it's interesting because I asked one question, you've answered it in a slightly different way, because I know what you mean. They were talking about like communication with patients. I didn't ask the question right, but it was good that you've kind of mentioned that as well. But I was kind of thinking about your communication style with therapists, actually.
Okay.
Social media, yeah. Sorry, well, like at the same time.
Oh, okay, yeah, I got you.
Both,
no,
you know?
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm any different. I've kept a really true path to myself with social media. I set my social media up to share information further than I can one-to-one in clinic, and it's grown from there. But my social media is nothing other than professional stuff. I don't share any of my political views. I don't comment on things that are outside my wheelhouse. I have opinions on these things, but I don't share them online. That's not what it's there for. People don't follow me for that. So I probably, in person, might give more about me away than I would online. But only in the way I'd try to build a relationship with someone. It would never be anything that crosses any boundaries. But I just think perhaps those people who have more time invested in me and vice versa, then they'd probably find out more about me on an in-person session than what you'd see of me on social media. It's just even those people who know me well on social media, most of the things they know about me are because of the times we've spent in person. I tend not to be, I think it's really black and white how to manage yourself on social media, and I cringe all day, every day, watching how some people out there comment on stuff they really shouldn't be, the way they comment on stuff. I'm the angriest, shoutiest, swearing person in the world outside social media, outside my clinical practice sometimes, but I'm not. I find it very easy to put that hat on and just be professional.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a few things that I probably wanted to go down with you there, but I'm going to loop back to it maybe in a little bit, because some really good stuff in there. But because of what you do and your background and your experience, and what I want to get for listeners who and myself selfishly is I'm trying to unravel the conversations we have with patients to build connection and trust quickly. I think me and you agree on that. I've seen you enough talks, etc. We're all in line with that. But what makes or breaks communication with endurance athletes, or people? They don't have to be necessarily athletes. Just the athletic population who like endurance running, cycling, swimming. Is there any kind of make or breaks in that communication, or what your tips or analogies around communicating with that particular clientele? Is there anything you could maybe reflect on?
I'm a massive fan of just trust and honesty. I do a lot of coaching and I do a lot of treating with athletes, and I think it's really honest sometimes to tell them the things they're doing right, the things they're doing wrong, the things they could be better at. I think things like time scales to get to their goals, time scales to get back into training from injury. I'm very honest and very open. I offer options to people, and we collaborate what those options are, and give them two choices. Hopefully they're both good choices, but they're things that they trust and buy in. And that honesty fosters trust. And when the trust is there, it becomes really easy to work with people, because just locally here, for example, I've got a reputation. There's a really big running club about 5 miles away, and there's an abundance of therapists who like to dabble in working with endurance athletes near me. But everybody who gets in touch with me from that club says, "Oh, I've been told to come to you because you're the guy who will just be honest with us." If you and that standing joke is, if Mike says I need to stop running, I need to stop running, because Mike doesn't tell people to stop running. Mike will do everything he can to keep you running. So if he does tell you, you probably need to listen. And that's how I've always worked with everything. I just think, be honest, be truthful with stuff, be able to, give options and let them. And if they come back and the thing they've decided that they want to do isn't perhaps what I want them to do, I'll be honest and tell them that. I have plenty of conversations with people where I probably don't think, certainly in my coaching capacity, this is how I work. Let me know about yourself. And at the end of it, I'm not sure we're the right mix to work together. I think maybe you'd be better off with someone else who works a different way. Thanks for your honesty, and I'll go and source someone else. So, and I think as I've got older, I've got better at that, because I just don't want to waste people's time, or I don't want people to waste my time. My time is my premium right now, and I think just being, and I'm not blunt or short about it. It's long-winded, developmental conversations, but ultimately I need you to know the truth about me, how I work, what I think about your injury, what I think about your coaching. And sometimes sometimes I have to let people make mistakes before they come back and are ready to listen. I've had plenty of conversations with people who inquire about treatment, or they inquire about coaching, or they just drop me some social media messages. I'm training for this race. This is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? And it goes cold, because the truth and the honesty for me is not what they want to hear, and they'll be drawn, or they'll migrate to someone who's promising the world and selling everything under the sun to them. And weeks, months, years later, back they come with their tail between their legs, because tried the shortcuts, tried the cheat codes, tried the little gimmicks, and it hasn't worked. And perhaps I should have listened to the things you were telling me, but what you were telling me was boring, because it was truthful and honest, and I didn't want to hear that. I wanted you to tell me there was a quick fix. I wanted you to tell me you could get me to I remember working with a guy, or potentially working with a guy, this is probably it's pre-pandemic, so it's probably 6-7 years ago now. I'd seen him as a patient, and he came back to me years later to potentially be a coaching client. And lovely guy, had built up a very successful construction business to the point that the business ran itself. He didn't need to be there on a daily basis, and he had a lot of disposable income. And in his mid to late 40s, he'd found triathlon, found running, and he was just basically throwing every bit of money and time and effort he had into it. And he came to me about this coaching, and he basically said, I can't remember the ins and outs, but it was something like, I'd like to chat to you about coaching. What I'm thinking of for next season, this would have been probably early winter. I'd like to do sub 20 minutes for a park run. I'd like to do sub 3 hours for a marathon, and I want to do a sub 12-hour Ironman. And I was like, cool. When? Well, all this year. And I was like, well, I don't think that's realistic. I think each one individually is realistic, and potentially 2 would work. But there's no way we're getting to those 3 from where you're at now in the time scale we've got. And I don't feel comfortable to take you on and go for those goals if you're not going to be flexible with them. And it was a really interesting conversation, because we did have a level of trust and honesty, but he turns around to me after that and he says, okay. How much do you want? And I was like, well, what do you mean? His name was Mike, funny enough, as well. I said, what do you mean, Mike? He says, well, how much do you want to get me to those goals? And I said, well, no, I'm telling you honestly that in a professional capacity, I don't think it's wise to target those goals. We could do one this year, one next year, one the year after. I think they're achievable, but not in the next 12 months. Oh, but I've already entered these races. They're set in stone. We've got accommodation booked, all of that malarkey. I'll double your price. And I went, it's not about, there's no gimmick here. There's no catch. I'm not trying to up my price. I can't get you to those goals. By all means, go and find someone who promises you can, but they won't, and you'll break. And it ended amicably, and off he went. And not too much later, I saw online that he was nursing some injury again, because someone who was charging triple what I was charging had promised him the world and lied to him, basically, that it was a realistic goal. So I think it's really easy just to go, right, I'm just going to be honest, I'm going to be truthful. Some people won't like that. The way I work won't be the right fit for some people, and that's fine. Some people really want a transactional intervention with athletes and coaches and therapists. I really don't. the stage of my career, stage of my life now. I want to get to know people. I want to build relationships with people. I want to be able to go on a journey together sometimes. Sounds a bit sort of corny sometimes, but I love. I had athletes the other day who did. I had a lovely guy who's always struggled to get to his race goals because of either turning up on the start line with such a disrupted training plan, he just can't perform at the level he wants, or he doesn't make the start line because of injury. And this guy has proper trusted me for the last 12 months. He's always, go hard or go home, never really listened to rest, recovery, periodized training, any of that stuff. And he's proper trusted me. And he ended up, now he's qualified for the World Champs next year. And he's over the moon and I'm over the moon. And as I do with a lot of my athletes, I'm dot watching on race day to see where they are and how they're getting on. And I was really emotionally invested in this guy getting the time he wanted to. Because I built this rapport with him. We were friends who worked together in some ways, and I'm really excited now about the next step of him, of taking him to the World Champs, and the plan will be different, and how we get there will be different because he's a different athlete. We've got a different relationship. The trust is there. I can take a couple more gambles with him in his training, but it's that journey and that sort of relationship with people to me, and the only way those work is through communication.
Yeah, that's a great story as well in there about a few little things I've just written down. Like, you're talking about, which I've only kind of recently in the last 5 years really got a good grip of, contracting patients and understanding that. And that's purely going on communication courses and stuff, and understanding that, I used to always think, I didn't want to be too kind of, what are your expectations, the type thing. I just wanted to I was working more on building that connection at the beginning, and I thought that might sound a little bit cold, that was my honest opinion initially on. It was a bit like, where do you want to get to? I was kind of more I'd come in a bit warmer and early in some ways, but actually on hindsight, it was, you're not doing them any favors really, because they're the ones who, especially in patients, your regular patients, and they're the ones who come back through the door time and time again, because you really haven't set that kind of target, that contract, and that both of you have agreed at the beginning to get there, like you did with that guy.
But I think you've nailed it there with the both of you. I owe them a contract too. This is what you'll get from me. This is what you'll always get from me. It won't change. This is how I'll be the whole way through. You hold me accountable as well, because I'm here to support you. And
but that's how you build that trust, though, isn't it? Like,
absolutely.
This is where I think I've been trying. Every time I try to speak to somebody about how does this sound like in a conversation you have with a patient, like what we're having here now. But it's those little nuances, those things. But it comes from, as you said at the beginning, it's a bit like, are we both invested in this? And then once you agreed on that, then as you said, that journey of emotional, that you're invested in them, as you said, and it was nearly like there's a form of empathy, because if they lose or whatever happens, it's genuine. Like, people will look at you and they won't be like, oh yeah, you're just like, oh well, that's sad that you hurt yourself, you didn't make the time. You're going to be like, fuck, you didn't make the time, and how are we going to do next time? And that is going to be read all over your face, in your voice, and the athlete will definitely soaking that up, And I think that's the thing, is like, we having a conversation about communication, but there was so much entwined in what you were doing there with somebody and how that relationship builds. And sometimes, the job we have is we meet people, strangers sometimes, well, most of the time, and within 5 to 10 minutes, we have to be, they have to trust us and give us really dark, deep mental health, sexual health information. Like, this is fucking impossible. Do you know what I mean? Like, people aren't going to just divvy out that information. So it was great to kind of understand that sometimes that's authentic on your part, because at the beginning you set out that, okay, we're going on this together, which I think is a nice message to take from what you just said as well, Yes, that's cool. Like, there's other things, like, is there anything that you would see with endurance athletes that are conversations specifically around those that are a bit trickier, that you see maybe a trend in, that you have ways of maybe opening that up? Like, I'll give you an example, because it's a bit of an open question, but you get patients who just want an MRI kind of thing, but like, is there any of that similar thing in athletes? What are their go-tos when it comes to ones that you often having to have the same conversation around training? Is there anything that jumps out, or is that a bit too open?
Yeah, it's similar trends with everything. It's unrealistic race goals with unrealistic timescales. It's the desire to become an athlete that they're not in a timescale that's not going to be achievable. And similarly in the rehab capacity as well, the like that's just not going to get better in that time. Where we're going to be in 6 weeks is realistically here. It's not there. That's probably 12 weeks, and that's fine. We'll get you there and we'll push as hard as we can, but we'll just have to be realistic with it. So most of the conversations where the communication really needs to kick in is just, and this is a tough one for me because it'd be very easy for me to win people over by just criticizing others. There's so much nonsense out there in the endurance world, from rehab and from coaching, where I could just call other things out and say why they're nonsense, and that's not going to win me the trust I need in these people. That's just going to make me look like either bitter and twisted, or because some of this mainstream media stuff's got a lot more budget for marketing than I have. They're more believable sometimes than us. So sometimes it's that, like, I have to be quite comfortable and confident at just saying no sometimes to some people. No, I don't think that's realistic. No, I don't think I can get you there. I can get you there, but not in that time scale. Or, okay, so, and I often flip that around sometimes. And this is a really nice strategy that I don't think I ever deliberately started, but I became deliberately aware of it.
Yeah.
Was reverse engineering the unrealistic goals. So if someone came to me and said, Mike, I'd love to do, right now I'm running about 10K and I'd like to do a marathon and I'd like to do it in 4 months. But I've also got this low-grade Achilles or plantar problem that always kicks off when I run past a certain distance a week. And I'm going, okay, fine, cool. So where would you expect to be then halfway to that goal? So if you want to get there in 12 weeks, where would you expect me to get you to in 6 weeks? And they'll say this number, which is normally just a division or a retrofit from the final answer. Okay, cool. What about in 4 weeks' time? Boom. And they tell me the next bit. And I go, so to get you there in 4 weeks, which is what you've told me you think you need to be at, which then puts you in a position to get you to there in 6 or 8 weeks and there in 12 weeks, that means next week we have to be doing X, Y, and Z. Do you think it's realistic from where you are now from next week to go to that point? And they'll probably go, oh, no, I don't think so. Okay, so if I wrote you a rehab plan or a coaching plan now and week 1 looked like that, would you trust me that that's a sensible plan? No, not at all. Okay, so is your goal now still realistic? Oh, no, it's probably not. So I've really learned to not call them out directly on stuff, but to present their own arguments, their own logic in some ways, back in an illogical way that makes me look like I'm just putting common sense into deconstructing their opinions, and then I'll just flip it back straight round. So what would you think? What do you think would be realistic to achieve next week? Well, probably this. Yeah, I think that's realistic. And if that goes well, maybe we could do this the week after. Oh, yeah, that would make sense. They're now agreeing with the plan that I wanted to give them, but thinking it's their own plan. So, and then it becomes really, okay, cool. Well, how many times a week could you run? 3. Okay. So what running plan have you been using? 5 times a week. Okay, so that wasn't realistic. Cool. Should we go for 3 next week then? Yeah, okay. And all of a sudden, they're designing their own plan. And all I'm doing, I almost see it a little bit like I do my kids sometimes. I give my kid...
I just wrote down parenting.
Yeah. Here's 2 options. Which one do you want to do? Dad's happy whichever one you do because it's not the third option.
Yeah.
And the kid's toddling off, all proud of himself that he's a big boy and made this decision. And I'm almost doing the same skills with my athletes sometimes.
And the other thing, so I wrote down parenting, which is brilliant. And then I also wrote down is like, this does not matter whether they're an athlete or not, because I don't know about you when we do courses, and always the kind of like pre-course thing is, for my course, it's end stage rehab and return to sport rehab and all that kind of stuff. Like it's, the kind of thing the therapist will often do is like going, well, how many of you deal with, first of all, people in sport, and there might be a handful or a little, and then it'll be like, well, how many of you spend time at end stage rehab? A lot, none. So it's like, so you don't do it a lot, you don't see it a lot, but yet you want to come on a course and really learn loads about it. what are you doing prior to getting there? Do you know what I mean? Again, it's like, it's whether you're teaching therapists or whether you're teaching Hilda or Frank who want to just walk up the stairs, or whether you're treating an athlete or your kids. It's the same idea of coaching, isn't it? It's what you did is that here's your reality, and here's your goal, and you are fucking miles away from your plan here is here. You want to get here, and it, like, you know, most people can kick their logical brain in when they can kind of go, right, this isn't possible. So it's I think my point from what you're saying is that you can do that whether you're with an athlete or whether you're with a patient, a regular patient. It's the same idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. Somewhere along the line, we all lose the things we first started off doing and get all completely like weird about it. We've all gone on a placement or on a rotation and walked on the ward with that person who needs to mobilise the length of the ward before they get discharged. And on day one, we go, Betty, how far do you think we're going to go today? Or the nurse's station. Okay, do you think that's realistic? Maybe. Well, we'll get there and we'll see if we can do a bit more, shall we? Yeah, okay. You do a few steps and you go, should we just go to the edge of the bay today? Yeah, okay. And then suddenly, as soon as we get into the big wide world, we try to just make this all complex and complicated, and we forget the first thing we ever did was ask the patient. Ask the patient and then combine that with our own knowledge and expertise to find the sweet spot for both.
On that note then, where, like, obviously I without blowing smoke, is, a great communicator. That's why we've hung out and got to know each other so well, just because of meeting on the circuit, teaching and stuff like that. And you're always quite clear. Anyone I ever meet who's heard you talk is very clear. So where do you think that style came from? What, because I guess I want people listening kind of going, how am I going to talk like Mike? How am I going to be confident around that? Like, you make it sound simple, but simple comes out of something from confidence and knowledge about things. But where do you get influenced by that, and how do you shape your?
I think I think it's a perfect combination of multiple things, some good, some bad. I do think there's an inherent sort of communication in some people that is easier to develop than others. I think you go on courses and you meet people and you have mentors and role models, and you take the good things from some people and you take the bad thing, you try to emulate them, and you try to not do the bad things that you see from others. And then a big one, which I really don't think we talk about enough, you make mistakes and you get better from the mistakes. My first career was a physical training instructor in the Air Force. That career, in some ways, lived behind closed doors. The people who know me now in the big wide world of therapy wouldn't have known me back then. I was awful at some things back in the day. It was shouty, stand in front of people, instructor, do it my way, 2 feet together, jump type of things. I thought I was a brilliant communicator back then, because if I said something, someone did something, if they listened. And I'm thinking, well, no, I got a rank structure there behind me that's making someone do something. They probably think I'm awful at stuff. I took that, and then you need that ability to have a. You always talk really so well about your recipes, the different types of food around the world, and how those things mix. I have a template of how I like to communicate, but it doesn't work all the time. I coach kids football. I can't coach kids football in the same way I would speak on stage to some people. Some people would recognize bits of me off stage there, but I've got a different audience. I've got a different beast. But my fundamentals don't change. Be honest, be truthful, be open. Make sure I'm being attentive and listen to the things people are saying. Make sure that I'm prepared to take someone else's opinion on and go, yeah, perhaps you're better on that. And athletes, patients, they know themselves way better than we ever will. So why would we think we can just tell them what to do without finding out what they can and can't do and what they want to do? So I think it's, and again, I'm 48 years of age. I'm not the same guy I was at 28. And I've evolved and I'm better. So I would always have a lot of patience. And I do say it when I speak to student groups or younger groups. Don't sweat this stuff. Don't think you're going to be brilliant tomorrow. Might take you 5 or 10 years. In the same way, your clinical skills will improve over the next decade or so. You can't rush this. You can chip away at the statue and reveal bits and refine bits week on week, month on month, through mainly, I think, personal development. But even that then, there's times you just have to stop and get better at the things you're doing before you try to be better at something else. We're always trying to do something better, something new, something more advanced. Like, well, no. If I've just gone and learned about active listening, let's wipe the slate for 2 years with trying to add anything else until I'm really bloody good at that. And then I'll worry about something else.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. So obviously, previous guests who've kind of mentioned about that, like communication. You're doing it all the time, constantly. You walk out the door, you can do it. You can change it. Every little interaction you have is something that you could just be like, right there and then you can kind of, I could change how I am right now and just speak in a different way, good or bad. But that's how powerful it is as well. And it's the simplicity that I think when I've asked other people about why do you not value communication, because that's the big thing really, isn't it? It's like, again, you speak to people who are really interested in it. And that's what Ben Cormack said. He's interested in it. And by no means does he think he's a brilliant communicator. But he's actually the old classic Dunning-Kruger where you're like, I fucking don't know anything, actually. The more I know, the less I know. And I'm trying to just improve every day towards that mastery. But just that kind of surrendering to, it is really difficult. But once you start to realize that there's an art form to it, and it's actually probably your best skill when dealing with any type of patient, including the types that you see, and then how do we gain more value? How do we get people talking about it more? Like for example, why you're going to be good as well is because you work with students now, don't you, in university? So it's like, what are the kind of things, if you're a physio and they came to me and asked me what I think would be good, I'd be like going, those are the physios who've got, as Andy Hosgood said, better emotional intelligence than IQ, or EQ over IQ. So could you, maybe not your students, but even when you meet a physio or student or whatever, like, can you pick out like the good, like, can you nearly say like, I can see how this person's going to be a good physio, regardless of their information, their anatomical knowledge, their pathology? Like, is that something
Yeah, absolutely. Like with our interview process in uni, when we're taking on new students, there's an 8-station, multi-station interview. We don't ask a single question about physio. We've got one question we ask them where you're shipwrecked on a boat in the middle of the ocean. Here's a list of objects that you've got, and you need to prioritize that list and justify and tell us why you've put them in which order. And all of them just go, oh my God, because I didn't come prepared for that. What am I going to do for that? And I literally say to them, I'm not looking for the next Bear Grylls. I'm looking for you to just explain what you're thinking. And it's the curiosity. You'll get some who'll just go, oh, that's brilliant. What a great question. And you just go, wow, you've lit up there now. You're interested in what we've just said. You've not now gone, oh my God, I don't know what that means. I haven't revised that. I don't know how to answer that. Because anyone can come in and just roll off a script. And some of the answers, like the order, is wacky as hell. But why did you do that? And then you get this, and the answer to the question is curiosity, intrigue, and an X factor that is impossible to say. I can't explain it. You just know. You look at someone and you go, yep, you've got it. And what you've got might be different to the next person. We had one guy who's just started in year 1 this year, interviewed sort of spring last year. And I asked him that very question about this shipwreck. So gave him a couple of minutes thinking time. And normally the classic sort of approach would be, okay, so number 1 would be the fishing rod. Number 2 would be this. This guy just went, great. So before I give you my list, I've got some questions for you. And I went, oh, awesome. He said, go on, fire. And he went, I'm on my own. Do I have any skills? Can I navigate on a C-map? Because if I can't navigate with that C-map, that's redundant. This radio that you've given me, I don't know much about VHF radios, but does it work in the middle of the sea? Am I on a big solid boat or am I on a little inflatable boat? The guy was just, I was just like, your ability, your emotional intelligence, as he said, to just sort of go, the point isn't the list there, the point is something else. And those are the therapists then to me. They're the ones who become comfortable at going into a patient's coming in and you've got to assess their knee and they need to do some functional scale for some objective measures. And they just look upset and you just go, we're not doing that today.
Yeah.
Talk to me. Tell me what's wrong. How can I help you? They just deviate. And it was there's just those things. We have, what do we have the other day that was a good one as well? A really good example of someone that had such good X factor. can't remember. Oh, we do. One of the tests on this interview is so again, it's actually a communication station. So they come in. I'm giving all the secrets away if any future University of South Wales students are listening.
No one's fucking listening, Mike.
So they turn a card over, and on this card is an image of a Lego model. And then they turn around, and they have to instruct someone, verbally only, how to build this model that the person building can't see. So most of them get sucked completely in that the success or failure of that station is based on, did you build the model or not? And every now and again, some of them just get it. They just go, that's irrelevant. It's about how I communicate with you. And if we didn't finish the model, we didn't finish the model. And some of those who are really smart, and of course, personal backgrounds sometimes give people an advantage over it. Some will just go, before I start, can I just check? Is the person that's building this colorblind? Because if they are, me saying grab a blue one and put it on is futile. No, they're not colorblind. Brilliant. Are they deaf? No. I'm like, well, this is brilliant. And I literally sort of almost don't even build a Lego. And I just go, so what would you do if they were deaf? How would you handle this if they were colorblind? Oh, well, I would do this. Brilliant. You're getting the little asterisks in the corner of the paper from me to go, you're just different. You're just different because you're thinking outside the box and you're prepared to be vulnerable. You're prepared to fail at the task at hand because there's a bigger goal at the end of it.
And the thing I'd be interested to hear if anyone was listening to that story, because I'm listening to it and I'm hearing also, there's going to be some people who are going, fuck, I wouldn't have thought that. And, oh, right, like, that's really clever. Like, as soon as you said all that stuff, I thought, yeah, that's brilliant. And that's a type of person. And that's really, and curious is a great word. It's been used already on the podcast with someone who said, just be curious. So I want somebody who's listening who kind of going, don't worry if you were to have gone and listed all that stuff, because just listening to what you said there is not about then just learning how to do a task well and impressing you. It's the fact that actually just have that principle of curiosity, and like, this is obviously clearly nothing to do with your physiotherapy skills. You know, to kind of just think, actually, physiotherapy is more than just having the knowledge and being able to kind of dictate to a patient in front of you what you know, and hopefully they'll just complete what you've asked. It's the fact that you can always sit back and just go, right, I need to maybe look at things from a different perspective. And why don't I look at it from a different perspective? And again, that's maybe what we'll get into later about how you got different perspectives on this. Like, I've heard you talk about where, you know, we both read outside of therapy. We don't, you know, if anything, probably read more outside of actual direct therapy than I do anything else, psychology, etc. And for the same reason, I'd read a book and then I'd be like, oh yeah, so I have learned an element of that emotional intelligence. I certainly, as you said, I was a bit shouty, or I would have a certain approach to people, or I was taught that, yes, I have the information, and if I dictate it, people will just do what I say, you know, because that's kind of how I was taught. But again, it would have been great to, you know, and through mistakes and getting it wrong, and then hopefully having a curious kind of interest in this topic, it kind of grows on you. You mentioned X factors, like, how the fuck do I get X factor? It's like going, it doesn't just happen. It kind of happens from that interest and curiosity in this topic. So start to kind of get involved in that shit and, like, yeah, do your anatomy and do your pathology and understand that. But that moves like fucking, I wouldn't say snail's pace, but there's not mega jumps, is there, in a lot of the rehab we do? You know, it's not like, oh yeah, so this new invention of strength training. It's like, that's fucking hasn't changed much. There's different versions of it. What has changed as well is how we communicate. Look at the last 10, 15 years. We communicate mentally different. Like, we're communicating now on this, social media, etc. I know it seems very, but that's the thing. That's going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. AI, you name it. Communication is everywhere, yet people still don't kind of value it when it comes to a therapeutic relationship. Do you know what I mean?
No. It's the only thing, literally the only thing, where you could have this conversation with anyone in any field of healthcare and it applies.
Exactly.
We couldn't, you and I will love the exercise stuff. That's where we come from. We couldn't speak to every patient, every therapist about how to be better at exercise. It's not relevant for some people. but you have to communicate with everyone. And likewise, and I think that's why you and I have similar interests in the things we read and the things we learn, because people are just communicating in other fields. I'll be it'd be 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm watching my 10th TED talk of the night about some nonsense I have no interest in, but the person talking has just got me. They've just got me, and I'm going, look at the way they're talking there. Look how engaging they are. Look how I'm leaning towards the screen because they've sucked me in.
And that's the thing about, again, with talks and presentations, isn't it? It's that kind of like when you sit down to do a talk or a presentation or whatever. And I always try and say it to students who come and say, oh, I've got to say, I usually got to go, just don't fucking bore me. Don't bore me. Just, try and think about this as like you'd want to hear it. Because so many people go up and slap up information, and we know our memories are not designed for that. We like to be entertained to some degree. We like a bit of a story, and we like some sort of message at the end, and we can't take an awful lot of information. That's the end, right? And that's the same for fucking anything. Hence why you mentioned TED Talks. They're 17 minutes long for a fucking reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have, but in that 17 minutes, they're doing stuff that makes our brain go, we want this. So it's kind of like, again, how do you, whereabouts, like, let's go there with you actually. So what, give us a few things that really, is there anything that jumps out that changed your practice when it comes to that? Was there a TED Talk, or was there
no, there's an epiphany for me that I can almost put the date on. I spent 10 to 15 in my first 15 sort of years in rehab, and then the 5 to 10 years in sort of sports and exercise science before that was exclusively in the military and high performance sport. And I thought I was the bollocks because everybody got better. Everybody reached their goals, everybody get better. And all I did in those 15 years was upskill clinically. I had advanced this and advanced that and did all of these things. I thought I was brilliant. And then I left the military, and I joined the NHS first year. First year I was in the NHS. I was in my early mid-30s. And I'm going, nobody's doing anything I'm asking them to. Nobody's listening. I've got a woman sat in front of me in the MSK outpatients in Slough who's going, someone's been here that I know in the last couple of weeks, and they said, you're the exercise guy. This is an initial appointment, first appointment. And I went, well, I wouldn't quite say that, but I certainly tend to base my treatments around exercise in a heavily weighted sort of ratio. Well, I'm just going to let you know, I'm inherently lazy. I'm not going to do anything. And and she was like 65-year-old lady, and she literally, I'll never forget her words. She went, so we can do two things, young man. We can do the dance. You can give me the stuff. I'll go away, tell you I'm going to do it. I'll come back in a few weeks and I won't have done it. Or you can just send me to someone who's probably going to rub me, poke me, pull me, and we can all go home happy. And at that particular time, I just went, cool, wait there 2 secs. I walked to the reception, and I booked it in with someone else and said, cool, there's your appointment. You can come and see such and such tomorrow. They work in a different way to me. And I went home. And that repeated over a period of time. I was starting to see private people in my own clinic at the time then. This was probably like 2010, 2011. And people weren't getting better. They weren't doing the things I asked them to. And I'm sitting there thinking, but I've got all these quals and all these skills, and everybody I used to see got better. Why aren't you lot get better? And it's where my whole, like, if I was to just work in one area right now, it would be exercise adherence. That's the thing that sparks me up. I love it. And the understanding of why people do and don't do it. And I had to really reflect internally about, like, well, this is me. This isn't them. This is me. I'm the population's changed, but why have I suddenly got such a lack of success with some of these? It's me. It's my expectations of them. It's the way I'm communicating with them. It's the way I'm learning about them. And I had to make a super sharp, swift change to the point where I was almost like two personalities. Because when I did go back into high-level sport or worked with high-level athletes, I was still dabbling in and out of the military at the time. I went back to old me. But everybody else, I got to be different here. And that's the moment for me where the whole thing sparked up about communication, about sort of relationship building. And I think we waste the word therapeutic alliance. People chuck it out. They don't really know what it means and the nuance behind it. And even that it's not the same thing for every patient. it's an aim that we're looking for, but it's not the same thing. How I go about it with different people changes, but I'm always fostering it if I can. And that was the catalyst for me. And that's best part of now 10, 15 years later, where almost exclusively, and it's not that I don't still try to upskill my clinical stuff, but like I say to my students, I'm probably the worst advocate for the CSP in the world, because I tell all my students, physio's not hard, physio's easy. It's hard to be good at it, but being a physio is relatively easy. It's not, it's literally not bloody rocket science, but it's hard to do it well. And that's when I literally went, this is all about me. It's all about how I need to evolve, how I need to communicate. The little caveat that came along at the same time, which I always tip my hat to, as I became a dad. I always say that the best but most expensive CPD course I've ever done was becoming a dad. How I have to learn to communicate and build a relationship, and you know what it's like yourself. The second you figure the buggers out, they change. And you're back at square one and you're working them all out again, and then you just nail that for a few months and the bugger changes again, and off you go again. That was literally, it was almost like a sliding doors moment on a Wednesday afternoon in 2010 where I just went, I'm going the wrong way about this. Park up the clinical stuff, move on to the personal stuff, build up behavior, understanding the rapport and the adherence and the communication, and I've never really turned my head back. I keep up to date with what's the latest with tendon management and blah, 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 blah. But and I approach everything with my student. Even now, I'm teaching a biomechanics module now. I've hardly given them any content, any pre-reading, any PowerPoint stuff to just send on them. Let's chat about things. Let's work things out together. Let's do debates and discussions. Let's do this and that and just communicate over it, because it's far more useful and you're live in the moment getting better feedback about it. There was literally like a Wednesday afternoon where I went, that's it. That's time to change.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's a couple of things, God, yeah, some really good points in there. Like I was chatting to a physio today in her supervision in my NHS job, and she'd had this patient, and she was chatting, and the patient wasn't having it. Now it was interesting because my colleague's Polish, so she doesn't. It's not her first language. Excellent English, fucking better than mine. But it was interesting. She was explaining this in an FCP role. So 20 minutes, patient comes in. So that, I think that's relevant to what we discussed. And it was so she came in, she's chatting to this patient not having it, and she basically was like OA knee / Paysancer Ryan Bursa type problem. Didn't need imaging, was going through all the options, kind of get all the because she was like, she started with the conversation like, I don't think shared decision making always works, because she was kind of a little bit annoyed because this woman had made a complaint about her, So anyway, she was going through this story, explaining it all, and I said, yeah, that all sounds good. And then she went, well, she wasn't having it. She had the arms crossed and she didn't look very happy. So I just went, I thought I needed to give her what she needed to get a bit of buy-in. So, I said, oh, we'll get an x-ray, and I was like, all right, okay. And then the complaint came back in was basically this woman keeps changing her mind. And there was a little nod to the English language as well. So there was a little bit of that, which we could have focused on and gone, oh, maybe it's just somebody who struggles with a different accent and we don't know what's going on there. But then we reversed it again and we kind of went, well, what was quite interesting is you got to a point where you were solid with your explanation, but then you went, because you were trying to make somebody happy, you just went, okay, well, 1 minute you were going, don't have an x-ray. And then you were going, oh, well, we'll do an x-ray anyway. And I was like, you've lost it then. And she said, yeah, but she was really pissed off looking. And I went, no, I get it. I've been there when they're like that. And it was just in a time to lean in and just go, I see that you may be a little bit upset, or maybe you don't understand what I'm saying. Could you tell me what you were expecting to get from this? And if I could give you any more information. And it was funny, we went from, it wasn't shared decision making. It probably wasn't got to do with that she's Polish. It was got to do with, it was the fact that her as the therapist got anxious because she was upsetting somebody, didn't ask, just went with a solution and actually ended up like contradicting themselves, And so the reason I kind of mentioned that is even like your style now of teaching new students, which I, highly recommend people going. What's your university again?
University of South Wales.
It is, yeah. So I've always been, anyone who's kind of going, I want to do a physio course, I've been asking, because you guys are leading that kind of new approach, and that sounds brilliant, because you're already, as therapists, we were in there, well, all I can remember was, it was just learning, like, here you go, there's the information, sit down, repeat, learn, get off. Like, if I'm sitting down discussing biomechanics, which we did on my master's actually, but that's going to be brilliant. It's going to be so much kind of respect for you. You're going to be able to learn stuff off them as well, because everyone's got access to so much information now, haven't we? So all that kind of approaches is just think, if people listening would bring that into their own maybe NDTs or their own in-service training and stuff like that,
Yeah, and people's history is so unique. So we run a part-time program. So a lot of the people that come on our degree are a little bit older. They've had previous careers, their parents, so on and so on. They might come in, clinically very sort of raw. Put them on a placement in the first year, they just shine because they've got life experience. So why would I ignore that if I'm trying to chat about clinical stuff with them? Well, what's making you think like that? Get that buy-in. And the FCP one's a really interesting one, because when we moved back to Wales in 2017, that was a role I took for 18 months while I was setting up the practice and the business back here. And we used to go to this little cluster of GP surgeries and had a contract to just go in and do FCP roles half days in these places up in the valleys. And I had exactly the similar, the expectations of these patients was crazy. What do I end up doing? I just sit and chat to the GPs. Can you set the expectations for these people of what this is and isn't? Because I'm wasting 10 minutes of every conversation about it. That ended up being a series of sort of roundtable talks and discussions with these GPs around, look, this is how you can utilize this the best. That was another communication thing that just needed to think outside the box a little bit, needed to go back to source rather than trying to fish. Instead of fishing someone out of the river every 5 minutes, we went up river and saw what the problem was. But that, again, was that emotional intelligence of why am I now going to get frustrated at the next patient coming in who doesn't know what they don't know and doesn't understand what this role is? Let's go and change the way people expect and understand this role is. And, I just think common sense is a big thing for this stuff.
But that's it. Again, anyone who's sitting there, whether they're a year qualified or whatever it is, or a student, it doesn't matter really. If you're sitting there, often some of these things are just not spoken about. It's really obvious things. So if you have worked in Tesco's before or wherever and you're in a management role, it's the same shit. Again, it's like we said about the communication. Doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or not, we could have this conversation. People are like, yeah, that's how it works with clients. That's how it works with an accountant client. It doesn't matter. And you could be sitting there and just going, you know what? Is this not really obvious to people? And to be brave in conversations, because there's so many people. Like, again, back to Ben Cormack was saying, there's so many people. When you realize how how bad you are at communication to start with, or how many things that you could be better at, you start noticing how it's done really badly out there, and you can kind of think, wow. You start recognizing, like you were saying about like failures and stuff. But sometimes you watch somebody do a talk and you think, well, I'm definitely not going to do it like that. That's one way I've learned something. You always go on a course, you learn something, and one of them is, I'm definitely not going to present like that or talk like that or do that kind of presentation. So I think the message again from you and is to kind of like, and for me as well, I just think you can easily identify these things and then open those communications up, and it just makes that your job easier down the line. So this isn't, like you said, it's not talking to patients, it's making sure that the shit coming in the door is not. And we do that down here actually in Cornwall. We've had FCP meetings where I'm like going, if you're going to write a letter to me, make sure you write your kind of, your real opinion. Don't write a really flat letter, because they're going to come out. One girl that I work with just quickly mentioned, she wrote this brilliant letter. So I knew she'd written a couple of little nuggets in there that when I got in, they went, basically I was going to go, there was no options for this lady. Just medically, there was just really no options. And again, same thing, rehab wise, was limited big time. It was a huge weight issue. It was like, it was just the biggest barrier. There was no getting away from it. This was it. But I was able to listen for the first 10 minutes to this woman and not jump down any kind of little rabbit holes around her knee or anything like this. It was just because I knew what was going on. I had to get her, like you said, that trust and that relationship. So you had to get that listening. But I'd already been guided by the FCP. If I hadn't had that letter, I probably would have gone down a couple of traps maybe. And then that would have been a really long session. And when the woman at the end, she just was like going, like what you said again, she was like going, thank you for your honesty. At least I know now what I've got. And she came up with the answers effectively. And that's useful around topics like weight loss as well. But that came from, again, me having good conversations with the FCPs so that when they're sending them into our clinics, they're not walking away disappointed that they're not having surgery. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, really, really useful to see it from your side as well. Well, just to kind of maybe finish up, or certainly maybe a couple more things, but yeah, if someone was listening now, where are your go-tos, or where are your number ones for either books or resources around this type of stuff? What would you go to?
Oh, this is what I've been waiting for the whole time. This is my moment. You know me. I'm old school. I love to read. Obviously, I do use a lot of current media forms that help in other ways, but nothing beats turning paper for me. So I've got a top 3, which I'll finish up with. But you and I, we spend so much time chatting about this offline that I read very little anymore clinically. I do read research and I keep up with stuff. But for me, I just want to learn about people, communications, other things. So as just like an eclectic mix, these are books I've read in maybe the last 6 to 12 months. Joe Navarro, ex-FBI Agent's Guide to Speed Reading People. The book's called What Everybody Is Saying. Like, there's nothing in there that's clinically relevant, but there's humanistic relevance to every, he's got someone at gunpoint negotiating some sort of hostage situation, but I remember times when I felt like I'm at gunpoint with stuff, and it's a similar one. Nick Calender, Methods of Persuasion, How to Use Psychology to Influence Human Behavior. And I think like books like that remind me that we're way too honest as therapists. We don't think we can use tricks and manipulation and little things to influence people. You know, we're in a position.
It's a bad word, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit of a taboo.
Isn't it?
It's a bit of a taboo. We're caregivers and we're there to be honest. Of course we are. I'm not trying to lie to anyone, but if I can use certain body languages or whatever it is to, there's one book I read, which is one of my references, another sort of FBI hostage negotiator who uses things like mirroring with body language, but something called labeling, where literally sort of gets people to, okay, so we'll call that X. So something's ring-fenced and we've got a topic that we're comfortable discussing. And he loves to get the person to bring in the word no. And originally in that sort of hostage negotiating world, you never say no to someone. But actually, if you build that rapport and then you say no, it just speeds the conversation on to get to the bit you want to.
Yeah.
Every therapist you ever come across, what's the thing they always moan about? They don't have enough time. So we're not rushing a patient, but we can be definitely clear and decisive in trying to steer something to the end point to get satisfaction for the patient. Other books on body language. This is a really good one I was reading lately called Connect, Bradford and Robin.
Oh, yeah.
Building exceptional relationships with family, friends, and colleagues.
Hold that up. Hold that book up. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's such a
brilliant book.
course. They do it in... So anyone who's listening who likes audio, so all of the stuff you're like, I'm an audio person. I reading makes me go to sleep, but that they actually do a great podcast with Rangan Chatterjee. But they're in. I think he could even be in his 80s. He's been doing this course for like 50 years. So that's a brilliant book.
Yeah. Then I've got a lot of my stuff goes around psychology and adherence. So Switch, When Change is Hard, brilliant book.
Yeah. They do the same. They're the ones who make it stick. Have you read that one?
Yeah. And some of them are quite deep. Some of them are hard to read. Some of them are quite simple to read. I put things down and I reread them multiple times before I get them. But I would say if people wanted like 3 things to go away as a therapist to read, my number one, because it is topical, it is relevant, and I just we literally we use this as a source material on our treatment and rehab module. But we use Language of Coaching by Nick Winkelman.
Yeah.
When I go and teach about rehab or when I'm helping therapists develop their rehab, the sort of the connection that we have between our movement science knowledge and our communication is awful. The gap is so wide for most of us. You can have people who have phenomenal backgrounds and expertise in prescribing exercise and movement and analysing movement, but the ability to communicate through cues and awful. So I think that's a huge one. If you want a clinically relevant book, that's the one. Then there was the Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. This is that FBI hostage negotiator one. Brilliant. Why that's really good and why I think this is great is it focuses on the emotions and perspectives of the other person. So it's not necessarily self-development of the things I can do, although it does help you with the things you can do, but it's understanding the other person. And that's the person we need to understand. That's the one we really need to do. And then I've sort of copped out with the last one. I would say anything by Malcolm Gladwell. But the one that I really like right now, it's one of his more recent ones, he's got a book called Talking to Strangers, What We Should Know About the People We Don't Know. Really, really cool book. Looks at things like the challenges and the consequences of miscommunication and misunderstanding. So if I get this wrong, this is what's going to happen. So we're always trying to read the things about making it right, but it's all about sort of unfamiliar situations with two strangers and how things can go wrong and what the consequences of that are, which, you know, that's exactly what happens with us when communication breaks down.
Yeah. No, they're all, and the thing, like you said there, and your eyes light up about it. You're interested in the topic, and I think that's the main message again from every person I interview around communication or conversations is if you can generate an interest in it, even if you think, oh, how is this going to work? You read just one of those. I think it was, I can't remember which one that unlocked it. It could have been The One Thing maybe, but I think that was, I don't know if that was the one that did it, but it was a book that led on to other books that they referenced in it. And it just made me go, what the fuck have I been doing? In a good way. But and it wasn't someone else telling me. It was like, you know, itself, you kind of came across it. So you mentioned one thing there about different types of books, because sometimes, you know what I mean, some of them are just, yeah, they are hard. There's hard science behind it, or it's like I listen to them, so the voice can be a bit like, oh God, this is a bit drainy. Like, so I just have a mixture of them on the go. I'll have a bunch of them and I'll have ones that are easy to go, that I could just listen to when I feel a little bit like I don't need a big drama here, and other ones where like, no, I'm ready for a bit more of a detailed listen. And I think that's from what you just said there, same thing for me. It's just having that variety and picking up the skills from that, you know.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you know, earlier about things like AI. In the last 6 months, I've gone down that rabbit hole a lot with AI and tried to learn more about that. And you know, you pick up a book, or you can't afford to pick up the book, or whatever it is, and you just go, I just don't get that. Jump on some AI platform and just go, explain to me in 500 words what the point of this book is. What's the big take home? Explain to me what this might be relevant to a physio about communication.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Amazing.
Cool. And it's given me this little 2-minute answer that I've gone, okay. Suggest some other books that might be simpler to read and quicker to read that have the same, oh, cool, boom, here's my new reading list. Just, amazing, I've gone, a brilliant tool, something we shouldn't be scared of. And I went down that hole really because of a university thing. People were trying to work out how people might be manipulating this and cheating the system a little bit. But I spend tons of time on AI every day now, really trying to learn. And it's all self-development stuff, you know. Some of it's not great. Some of it's nonsense answers. Don't ask AI what the best treatment protocol for an Achilles tendinopathy is, but because it still thinks it's 1993. But
like that's the thing, is understand the types of AI that you've got, you know, and that there is different ones. And I think again, that's like anything, understanding the technology that you're using and coming at it from a point of view like that kind of stuff. That's exactly that. Develop me a top 10 list of references that I could go and look at now. And write this in a different way that make me understand it. Like it's a learning tool that's just unbelievable, especially for me. I mentioned earlier, I fall asleep annoyingly. Don't have the gift of being able to read quick, or I find it a struggle. So that type of stuff and that type of tech, and that there's other people listening again is. I suppose when I can't develop that side of myself, I have to find other areas. I have to be interested in other ways of finding it, and then by doing that then generated more interest in other things or other areas of trying to find that information. So again, I think, the message clearly from you again is having all that, those different tools and coming at it from just maybe a different perspective than you think you have to. You know what I mean? Like whether you're applying for a university place or trying to get a job, like I think the emphasis hopefully will start to shift that this is a skill that we could, can really transform healthcare if we do it right.
I think so, and it's one of those things which you're not going to be an expert overnight, but you'll be better every day by practicing it. It's just every time you do something, read something, learn something, you get better and better and better. Give me 3 TED Talks that I can find on YouTube that have the most views for helping deal with understanding other people's psychology. Boom, watch one of them. And just evolve. And you're never going to be perfect. I think I've probably, one of the traits I do see in a lot of therapists is that relentless desire to learn and evolve, which I think I've got, but also perhaps in a different light, maybe it's a fear of standing still more than a relentless desire to evolve. I'm shit scared of just falling behind. I'm shit scared of being that therapist that everyone goes, oh, he's a bit out of date. And it is exhausting and it is hard, and people have different bandwidths that they can apply to that sort of learning. But I do wake up every day fearful of don't stop, don't stand still.
That's brilliant, Mike, from the point of view of, great way to end the podcast in a way, but I've always said that I'm exactly the same. You know what Roy Keane talks about he says it a lot. Like he never really, he didn't enjoy the winning. He just was like, it's relief that I didn't lose again. Like that's what it's kind of like that, isn't it? Which I know you psychologists probably look at that in a way of kind of like why our brains work that way. Like I do get joy out of learning, but it is sometimes you just wish you could turn your brain off.
Oh, do you know, every day, and I'm really not trying to label people or pigeon or stereotype here, but every day when I'm driving home, and you drive past the pub where there's a couple of guys in sort of muddy overalls and they're having a beer in a beer garden at 4:00 in the afternoon, I have a little twinge of envy most days of going, I wish I could just be like that I'm just not stressed and worried about it to the level I am. But I know that if you gave me the chance to be that person, I'd last 5 minutes because I'd be straight back in going, I can't do that. No. And I think it's inherent in you. It's just, I'm the same with my parenting. I'm the same with my athletic stuff myself. I just never want to gather any moss and stop. And I guess the final thing I would offer, which is the fundamental change in me, and the thing that it's the message I bat on everywhere I speak, and my students hear it every day of me. Be world class at the basics, not basic at the world class. That's where physio goes wrong. Is everything's been set up to excel at this gold standard world class stuff, this sexy stuff that is very rarely needed, and when it's needed in a very niche part of your world normally. But the basics is good. If you're trying to be world class at basic clinical assessment, basic exercise prescription, everything that's rooted around them is communication, understanding behavior, affecting someone's behavior, and communicating with them. Then you just insert exercise, clinical assessment, blah 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 blah. It's the root of everything. So it should be the only. I would make year one of a university degree communication. Don't even touch clinical stuff. Don't need it. Be world-class communicators and then bolt a little bit onto it on the end.
Yeah.
Really would.
I'm going to finish with that because that's a great message in it, and I think you can apply that to all industries, and especially our one. So I really appreciate you coming on, Mike. And as I said, I'll direct people towards where you're at. But if anyone's a student listening and they want to do physio or not a student, they can't leave their university now, but they could do that. But I'll direct you towards. Thanks again, Mike. Cheers, bud.
My pleasure, bud.
Thanks for listening to TCUP. If you liked it, tell all your friends. If you didn't, well, maybe you'll like the next one. Go to procareeducation.com or Procare Education on Instagram for more information on courses and the Bamboo Project. And remember, always be sound and not a dickhead.